Welcome to the Rocks and Roots podcast, coming at you with another extra special episode. I am one of your hosts, Tumbles, and I'm looking at
Cranky on the other side of the state, and I am super excited because we had an absolutely amazing guest that we just finished talking to. So who did we speak to?
We spoke to Katie Gerber, and Katie Gerber is a Jill of all trades. She is a thru hiker, she is a nutritionist, she is a guide, she is awesome.
So she is an author and she is a guide for Shurka, which is Andrew Skurka's company. And my ignorance in the interview shows, and you'll hear my voice light up because I didn't realize that this is the Andrew Skurka when she told us Shurka. For those of you that don't know, he is perhaps the most famous and the most talented backpacking guide out there, and his company does trips all over the world. We get into it in the episode, so I was delighted. That was a bonus.
Yeah, Katie's been with Andrew Skurka for now 2 years. She's been with his company, so it was a pleasure learning all about that.
Yes, and she herself is, as Tumbles mentioned, her focus is nutrition. She is a nutrition and health coach. She has over 8,000 trail miles under her belt, including a PCT thru hike.
As well as a Colorado Trail thru hike.
Yes. And she is the vice president of the American Long Distance Hiking Association.
Just by talking about her bio, I mean, there's still plenty that we need to talk to her about that we just didn't get to in this episode. So we plan to have her back on, and hopefully she accepts our invitation.
All right, let's plug our shit so these people can listen to this amazing fucking interview.
Do you want to try again? Or shall I plug?
You can plug.
All right, follow us on the gram, rocks_and_roots_pod. Find us on the TikTok, which is rocks_roots_podcast. And the reason why I'm talking so fast is because it's going to be in the show notes, and it's plugging every week. You can also find us on the YouTubes. Just put our name in. Please give us some cash on Patreon so we can pay our subscriptions every month to keep our show going. And last but not least, you are most likely listening to us on Apple Podcasts. Please leave us some stars. Leave us a note. We love to hear from you. We're tired of hearing our own voices. Let's hear from some other people. Anything else, Crank?
That's it. Without further ado, here is Katie Gerber.
All right, Katie, good evening and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
We are excited that you are here. Welcome. So let's start with the basics. How long have you been hiking and what got you into it?
Sure. Yeah. So I have been enjoying the outdoors, since I was a kid. I never thought of it as like hiking at that time, but our family was always out walking around in the woods. I grew up in rural Ohio, so we had a lot of space to roam there. We would go foraging for mushrooms and go out and swim in lakes and things like that. So I developed this love for the outdoors really early on, but I didn't actually take my first overnight backpacking trip until college. I went to OSU, Ohio State, and I found out they had an elective where I could take a backpacking course and get credit for it. I was like, yes.
So jealous.
For that. I was like, yes, please.
Our listeners know we're an audio-only podcast, but both Tumbles and I are making faces. Like... And I have said on many a hike, if I had a time machine and had to go back, I would have started one where I went to college. So that's awesome that you had that opportunity.
Yeah, New Jersey doesn't have anything like that.
I was so surprised to find it there, and it was so fortunate. I will say, like, the whole backpacking style that they taught was like very traditional and outdated. And it was like, I think the instructor had us like wear like external frame backpacks. So I mean, this was like the early 2000s. It wasn't that long ago, but it was enough to get me started. We did one overnight class trip. I think it was down to West Virginia, and that was enough to be like, oh, I'm interested in doing this.
Hooked.
Yeah. And then it was a few years later that a friend from college invited me to join him on his AT through hike. I had no idea even that the AT existed or what through hiking was, but I was just at a place in my life where I was like, not super like into a career or anything like that yet. And it was just a good opportunity for me to be like, yep, that sounds interesting to me. So yeah, I jumped on the AT with him. It was my, I guess, second ever overnight trip that I ever did, was like starting this hike on the AT with him. And I think I was there for about 6 weeks. I think that I stayed on. I didn't through hike with him. I just hiked with him for about 6 weeks of his hike before I headed off onto another adventure.
And
6 weeks?
Yeah, 6 weeks. I mean, that's crazy, going from one night to then 6 weeks overnight. So how did you feel? Where did you end up?
Yeah, well, it was a steep learning curve, that's for sure.
That's for sure.
I remember I got to like the first trail town. I'm spacing on the name of what it is, right after Blood Mountain. But my
Mountain crossings.
pack was like 50 pounds, and I spent probably like $1,000 there lightening my pack because I just like was so novice to it all. So there was tons of learning, and then yeah, I ended up hiking with him until around Bland, Virginia. That's when I got off for that. Yeah,
That's a
section. So I think it's like 600-ish miles.
That's a pretty impressive section. So that's about 100 miles a week. That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, I love to hike, and I've always been pretty, I don't know, I like stayed in decent shape. So even with the heavy pack, I was able to like keep a steady pace going. So,
And what year was this?
So-
Did you go?
So this was 2009.
Okay. All right. So a while ago.
Yeah.
And then assuming after that you were absolutely hooked, if you weren't already.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it was on the AT that I found out about these other magical strips of trail that went all the way across the country. And I was like, oh, there's a thing called the PCT and the CDT. And that just immediately like planted a seed in my mind. I didn't make any like set plans of like, oh, I'm definitely going to go hike these trails. But really like the idea really captivated me of like similar trails, but out west. Especially growing up in the Midwest, like the West just sort of had this magical appeal and pull that I was like, I will get out there someday and hopefully I will hike one of these other long trails. So yeah, it's fair to say I was definitely hooked.
All right, and you did. That's actually yet another perfect segue. So your PCT through hike was next, or did you do stuff in between?
It was the next real like backpacking trip I took. I did other life things, but I did not do much backpacking after the AT section and before I did the PCT through hike in 2014. So there's like a 5-year span in there.
And what did you do to prepare for your trek?
Yeah. Well, I had a lot of preparing to do because I had sort of like been out of this world for a while. And I will say like in 2009, there weren't the resources that are available today in terms of planning, especially online resources. It was just, I mean, I maybe was in a couple forums, if that, but a lot of it was just trying to figure it out before I did that first section of the AT. And so before the PCT, there was so much to learn in terms of like ultralight gear and what do I eat when I'm out there and how do I know where to send boxes and like all of it, all the stuff. So I read blogs and I like checked out guidebooks and, what was it? It was mostly blogs, I think, that I read and other people's experiences. And that gave me a really good insight into how to plan and what to expect.
Yeah, this was the time before the vlogs. The YouTube vlogs just blew up. I think it was like 2017 when that really started up. So yeah. I don't want to say I commend pre-vlog through hikers more or less, but yeah, you really have to do your homework. That's for sure.
Yep, that is for sure. Yeah.
And I love talking about this because I was not a through hiker, but I hiked on and off through middle and high school. So mid to late 90s, very early 2000s. So I started with external frame packs and boots. And what was the biggest from your AT section hike to the PCT in that 5-year gap? What was the biggest change as far as gear that either shocked you or that you noticed?
Yeah, That's a great question. So I think that was during a time. So that was 2009 was the AT section that I did, and then 2014 was the PCT. And I feel like that like early 2000s and like 2010-ish to 15 was when there was so much innovation happening in lightweight gear that even when I was outfitted with like a decently light setup on the AT at this at Neal's Gap, even then, when I started researching again in 2014, everything had gotten even lighter. And I was like, oh, I thought that I had a kind of light setup, but now I realized that like, I don't need a 70-liter pack, and, you know, I don't need a 0-degree sleeping bag and things like that the person on the AT had set me up with. So just realizing there were, and like quilts, that was like kind of mind blowing. I was like, oh, I don't need a mummy bag. This is fascinating. So yeah, I can't even pinpoint one big change. I think it was just like seeing how much the whole industry of like lightweight backpacking gear had evolved in that short time span. I was like, I feel like I have to learn so much new stuff, but it was fun and it was exciting.
Awesome. And I am laughing at myself because I still rock a 70-liter pack.
That's awesome.
I still rock the mummy bag. It's a new pack. It's not like outdated, but it's very large. So
You fit like a child in there.
I know, that's the thing. I was like, if I take the big pack, I'm just going to fill it with stuff. So.
Exactly.
And that's what I do.
Usually, from what I know about the PCT, is that there is also a spot like Neal's Gap where you could do a shakedown of your stuff. There is something similar on the PCT, and did you have to lighten the load?
You know, there are some towns like early on in the PCT that are like, would be good for that. Like I think Laguna would be a spot for that, or yeah, some of those earlier towns that you hit would be good places to like swap out gear. Mm-hmm. I can't picture an outfitter that's like, well, so I went northbound, and I can't picture like an outfitter that's so conveniently located like right on the trail in the way that it is in Neal's Gap. But to the second part of the question, I didn't swap out much on the PCT. I was pretty dialed in at that point.
Excellent.
Yeah, thanks to like obsessively spending way too many hours researching and stressing about it in advance.
I was just going to say that's, you know, the purpose of research. So it sounds like you did well on your homework. And I was just thinking tumbles when you asked that question. That's the scene in what's the movie about Cheryl Strayed, and then the famous scene where she gets to town and they're like pulling pots and crap out of her bag.
Yeah, that's Wild.
Wild.
Okay, yes. Mm-hmm.
Wild.
So yeah, there is that exact scene in Wild. What was the hardest part of the PCT?
Oh man, PCT is such a nice trail. I'll say the hardest part, what just popped in my head, was the mosquitoes in Tuolumne Meadows, which is like one of the stops in the Sierras, or not the stop, but a location that you walk through.
You're the second person that's mentioned the skeeters out there.
Is that right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
funny.
And Tuolumne Meadows is northern Yosemite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, such a nice area of trail too. And of course you were plagued.
Right. Yeah, I think it was just the timing that I hit it. It was like right after the snow melt that they were just like vicious. I can just remember like walking as fast as I could. I'm like, I bet I can outwalk them, but I couldn't outwalk them.
Now, being from rural Ohio, what did you think of the desert and then jumping right into the Sierra and then kind of going back into the desert?
Yeah, it was spectacular. It was truly every day. And maybe it sounds over the top, but truly every day was just like fantastic. Like it was dreamy, you know, it was new and it was interesting. And I liked the different challenges that each part of the trail brought. So I enjoyed having to like think about my water, and I'd never hiked around like cacti before. Like that was new to me. And like, thinking about when I'm hiking during the day in the desert. So making sure I'm hiking like early, maybe taking a midday break under a bridge because the heat was so intense, and then hiking in the evening, like that was all new to me. But it's so fun when you're learning so much. It's all new and it's interesting, and you're like increasing your skill set so rapidly that it's just, it's very exciting. And then, the challenges that came with the Sierras, like altitude and walking over snowy passes and like a little bit of like navigation and route finding to try and get over those passes when the trail was buried. Again, just so much like skill building. It was awesome. I truly enjoyed the PCT so much. Yeah.
Were you mostly alone? Did you find I hate this term, but I can't think of a better one at the moment. Did you find a tramley? So ashamed of myself right now.
I mostly, well, let's see. So I hiked large sections of it alone. I started by myself, hiked large sections alone. And then there were times I never hiked with like big groups of people, but there were a couple of times I would pair up with like one other hiker. Like we happened to both be hiking by ourselves. So for example, through the Sierras, there's a guy who I had met up with and we hiked the Sierras together, but it all like came together very easily and naturally. And then we kind of like would go our separate ways quite easily as well. Like he was like, I'm going to hang out in Tahoe for a few days. And I was like, great, I'm going to hike on, and no problem, no big deal. So I really enjoyed that style of hiking where, you have both the camaraderie of hiking partners as well as the freedom that you get when you're solo and, you're not having to make all decisions based on what your hiking partners want.
Now, I was going to say, Crank, I ask this about everyone. So many people have hiked solo, but I look at mental health as very important. So how was your mental health during those portions of hiking solo?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was great. I do really well. Like I'm a pretty like introverted person, and actually on the PCT, I didn't take any like music or podcasts or anything. So actually I'm kind of like in retrospect thinking like, wow, that was sort of interesting. I was able to like entertain myself with my own thoughts the whole time. But, wow. It may have just been that like I needed that decompression of just like walking and letting my thoughts like move and flow out or thinking of nothing. But yeah, I enjoyed the times I was solo, and I enjoyed like the independence that it gave me. And I think it helped me build a lot of confidence as an outdoors person as well, to be able to know that I was comfortable hiking solo. And then it made me even more excited when I would see other people on trail, and we just have a million things to talk about because I hadn't talked to another human in a few days. So yeah, it was good.
And then on your website, you said you had some health problems post trail. You said you didn't feel healthy. So what was going on there? What do you think caused it?
Yeah. So after the PCT, I was experiencing quite a bit of fatigue and just like extreme muscle tiredness that wouldn't subside. I had actually planned a 20-mile race that I was going to do after the PCT. It was like a lottery system, and it was a really competitive race near Asheville, and I had finally gotten a lottery ticket, and I was going to do this race. And I got back from the PCT and tried to start training for it. And I couldn't run more than a few miles without just such extreme fatigue. And it was so bizarre. And I had no idea what was going on, but I realized like I had to cancel the race because I wasn't going to be able to compete with all this fatigue happening. Thanks. It was disappointing at the time, but ultimately it led me down this path of doing tons of research, getting blood testing, going to the doctor, all sorts of things to figure out what was going on. And I had some other symptoms as well, like hair loss and depression. I was really feeling like cold all the time. And I eventually found out through some blood testing that I had an autoimmune thyroid condition, which is called Hashimoto's, and also that I was having some adrenal fatigue issues going on. So that's what was going on health-wise. And it did take kind of a while to figure that out, but eventually I did, which was great because then I had a target of like, okay, now I know what's going on. I can start doing things to help myself get better. And as far as what I think caused it, I think that was sort of like a perfect storm type thing of a number of factors of a genetic predisposition, as well as eating some foods that I was unknowingly eating foods that I was intolerant to, like wheat and dairy. And also I was hiking the PCT as a vegetarian. So I was probably, and not eating junk foods, but also not thinking about how like the macronutrients that were making up my food. So I was probably under eating protein. And of course I was pushing my body really hard. So that likely contributed to the adrenal issues.
That's interesting. I have a friend who is living with Hashimoto's as well. Now, she does eat meat and is fairly sedentary in her life. What contributes or causes Hashimoto's?
Yeah, so it's an autoimmune condition, and so there's a genetic predisposition to it, and then there are usually environmental factors that trigger it. So it's kind of it. There are a number of different things that can be at the root cause of it, is what I'm trying to get at. So for some people, like sometimes women experience after giving birth, Hashimoto's will kind of crop up then when their like systems are maybe not as resilient. And there are sometimes it can be like triggered by, as I mentioned with me, like eating things that I was intolerant to, which were causing gut permeability. So like when I was a vegetarian, I was eating a lot of wheat and dairy. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a vegetarian at all. There's definitely healthy ways to be doing it. And I wasn't doing it in an unhealthy way, but again, I was eating foods just that my body was intolerant to. So it caused this gut permeability. And once these proteins got into the bloodstream that weren't supposed to be there, it just like made my immune system kind of go crazy basically. And then the immune system gets confused and attacks your own body. So in this case, it started attacking my thyroid. And it can be so challenging with autoimmune conditions to get to the root cause of what's going on, because it can be different for different people. Like some people might be triggered by mold in their environment, or heavy metal toxicity, or just a variety of different things. So it can be really hard to treat the condition. Of course, there are like medications that can be supportive, but as far as like getting to the root cause of like, how do I help myself feel better from like a lifestyle and diet perspective, it can definitely be a challenge.
Yeah, my going along with that, my next question would be, were you going to a more holistic doctor? Did he or she prescribe more vitamins and minerals, or was it a more conventional doctor?
Yeah, so the way I found out that I had the condition was I was started seeing a functional medicine practitioner, and she was the one who recommended all these different panels. So she did all sorts of blood testing, and she did like a stool test, and she did a hormone test on me. So all sorts of different things to get like a really complete picture of what was going on for me. And it's really beneficial to, if anyone else like who's listening is suspecting they might have something like immune related going on, I definitely recommend seeking out a functional medicine or an integrative medicine practitioner who is going to really run that full panel on you and try to get to the root of things. So yeah, that's how I found out. And she gave me some recommendations for books to read. And she did suggest some supplements that I start taking to support my specific issues. And yeah, kind of a whole protocol of like a dietary protocol where I identified the foods that I was intolerant to so that I could remove them from my diet. Right. A gut healing protocol because that was part of the whole picture. I did an adrenal healing protocol that involved like cutting back on caffeine and easing up on exercise, giving my body as much sleep as it needed. So things like that. And then, yeah, she sort of helped me rebuild like a nutrient-dense anti-inflammatory diet that really helped keep symptoms at bay, balance my blood sugar and things like that would just like support my body in healing itself.
Fascinating. Thank you.
So yeah, definitely. Thank you. And that's actually the main reason that we wanted to have you on the show, is to talk about food on trail and eating healthy, because most backpackers, when they're packing food, they're planning meals, the main concern is weight and does it taste good? And like you said, you are not thinking, and you probably ate healthier than most if you're doing vegetarian on trail. It's just unfortunately your body didn't like it. Most of us, it's backpacker pantry, it's mountain house. When you get into town, it's pizza,
calorie dense and junk.
Yes. And reading, your story on your website made me think of, there's an article that came out a little bit ago, last year, and it's on backpacker.com. We've talked about it before on the podcast, but could thru hiking be bad for your health? So this guy did, before he did his PCT hike, Tom Heinbachel did a series of medical tests, and then he did his PCT hike, and then he came back and he had the same series of tests. And what they found, I lost the paragraph. Let me see if I can find it again. All right. So snacked on typical thru hiker fare, jerky, pastries, chips, all the crap that we eat when we are on trail. And his post-medical examination revealed that his arteries had taken a turn for the worst. His brachial artery flow, mediated dilation, which is a measure of how well the endothelial lining does, which is a layer of cells, was reduced. It had dropped by more than 25%. His aortic stiffness had risen by 5%. And when this article came out, we kind of panned it because that seems to be a little extreme, but it did get us at least thinking, and I suppose that was the point, about food and at least being more aware of what you're eating on trail. So, and that's why we had you on, because that is now your specialty. So you talked a little bit about some of the changes that you made to your own diet, but what recommendations do you have for trail? Like, what are the criteria that you look at when you are either helping someone plan for their trail meals or when you are planning for your own?
Sure. Yeah. And I remember. No, it was great. Yes. And I remember seeing that backpacker article come out, and a couple people sent it to me, and they're like, "What do you think about this?"
Yeah. So what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was extremely fascinating to finally just see a little bit of data, because I had never seen any data of these physiological measures before and after a thru hike. So I thought that was fascinating. Of course, I think, it's only one person, right? It's very limited. It's one person. And I can't remember the details, but I think they only studied him at one point. So I would be like, it was maybe like a month after, or I forget the time, like how long it was after he finished his hike, but they did this blood work. I would love to see like follow-up studies, like did these metrics like rebound into normal range once he was no longer eating the thru hiker diet and hiking so long and stuff like that. So like, I think we can only take so much from it.
I think those were some of the criticisms that we had too, because the article is pure clickbait. Is thru hiking bad for you? Like, well, you only did 2 data points. It sounds like he didn't make any healthy choices on trail, so that.
And not to mention, then he did like,
as far as our criticisms.
Didn't he do like 100 sit-ups beforehand
push-ups
yeah, beforehand?
So he do like normal thru hiker stuff as well. But anyway, so back to enough bitching about the article again. What are your criteria when you're helping someone plan their trail food pack out?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll back up a minute and just share like what my experience was when I was starting to go from this place where I wasn't even sure if I would thru hike again to finding a diet and a lifestyle that actually helped me improve my health at home. So then I could get back onto long trails and then do like the Colorado Trail and the Oregon Desert Trail. And so I was able to start thru hiking again. But I knew that it was so imperative to like my ability to thru hike that I eat well on trail as well. So when I started planning my food at that time, I was thinking about it like through a new lens. And I was like, like it's not just like it'd be nice to eat healthy on trail. It was like, I need to do this for myself so that I can be able to be out there hiking. So I came up with these 5 criteria that I use, because it's still really important to me as someone who's carrying all my weight on my back that I have energy dense food, the high calories per ounce that everyone talks about. So that's one of the first criteria that I use. Like, it still has to be something that's energy dense. So I'm not carrying like piles of like fresh veggies on trail. Obviously that's not going to be very calorie dense. So one thing is energy density. The second thing is that I look at is nutritious. And so for me, that meant that it helps with balancing my energy. So we can dive into like what I mean by that specifically, but like basically like balancing blood sugar contains a mix of macronutrients that help me balance blood sugar and keep my energy steady, and then also anti-inflammatory. So We can also dive into that if you want, but basically that it's providing antioxidants to my body that are going to help heal like some of the free radical damage that occurs from really heavy exercise when you're hiking all day long. So something that's like food that are actively like healing my body versus like contributing to the inflammation like a lot of processed foods might. My third criteria was that it's packable. So I want things that are compact and that they pack well into my food bag and they're not going to be crushed. And like, of course, we all know we're not carrying like glass jars of nut butter or, whole bottles of like condiments or things like that. So that's a pretty one that, anyone's going to carry. Any thru hiker is going to carry foods that are more packable, or any backpacker. The fourth one is appetizing. So that was another one that you mentioned that any backpacker is pretty much thinking about, like, does it taste good? Like we want to get to the top of the hike or the end of the day and open your food bag and actually want to eat what's in there.
Yes.
And something that I love to share with people is like, you can eat food that is good for your body and that tastes good. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. Like they could be both. And then the fifth criteria that I look at, and this is just my personal preference, is simplicity. So for me, I want food that is simple to assemble at home or simple to find in a grocery store on trail if I'm not mailing myself a resupply box, like ingredients that I can go into almost any store in any little town and find them anywhere, like whole oats or trail mixes or things like that. And then simple to prepare in the field. So I like to spend like the bulk of my day hiking and then just get to camp, make simple food, eat and sleep. So I don't want like, things that require extensive preparation. So that was the criteria that I laid out for myself. And then I realized as I started sharing about this, so I had started my website and started working with clients at the time, as I was sharing a lot of this stuff, that not only was this beneficial for me as someone who had health issues that I was trying to keep at bay, but truly a lot of these principles and way that I was approaching trail food could be beneficial for any hiker who wanted to recover faster, who wanted to have more steady energy, who was interested in eating from a little bit more health focused perspective, maybe for their long-term health, or I've heard a lot of people actually say, like, I don't want to become addicted to like junk food and have a really hard time at the end of my hike transitioning back to a normal diet.
We hear that all the time.
It's just kind of the whole idea of like the foods that we let ourselves like become addicted to, or like food relationship stuff that can be really hard to shift those habits once you get back home. So I started doing this work and just laying out a lot of like, here's the recipes that I'm using, and starting to work with people in that way around helping them plan trail food, and also working with people on their health before the trail and all of that. So yeah.
Okay. So question just for like my own curiosity. So you said free radicals as a result of exercise. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So like under strenuous exercise, our body can produce, it's actually like exercise is good for you, of course, but excessive exercise or really strenuous exercise can be stressful to the body and can cause like muscle damage. You know how like muscles can be damaged before they're repaired, and that's actually what like strengthens.
Yes, I was just going to say that's how you build muscle.
Yeah. And so that's sort of what I was referring to with that, is like any free radical damage that's happening in the body, whether it's from strenuous exercise or like the foods that you're consuming, which can cause some like free radical damage and stuff like that. So these antioxidants, which we consume through food, can help us combat that free radical damage.
Kind of to go back a bit, you said you started your website, you started taking clients. How long after the PCT did this kind of materialize?
Yeah, so I started my business in 2017, and that's the year I started seeing a few clients that year, and then, just started building things up gradually.
All right. Yeah. Now, did you go to school for nutrition?
I did an online certification program. Cool. That is an accredited program, and it was to be certified as a nutrition coach and a holistic health coach.
Oh, that's
so
great.
That was the training that I did for that. Yeah.
Sweet.
So can you walk us through a typical day of food on trail? Like, what are you taking with you that works, that meet those 5 criteria? Sure.
Yep. So breakfast is usually, it's one of 2 things usually. So it's either if I really want to like hit the trail and go, I'll just pack up and start walking, and I'll eat like a protein bar. So kind of generally speaking, when I'm having breakfast, I want to make sure I'm getting in about 20 grams of protein at that meal. And that's, again, to like balance my blood sugar. So I had found in the past that if I ate a really high sugar or high carbohydrate breakfast, that my blood sugar would spike and then it would crash like half an hour later. And then I would be hungry again for something like sugary and carby. And then I would eat something sugary and carby, and then it would spike and crash and spike and crash. And I would be on this roller coaster like all day long. And it just didn't feel good. Like I wasn't having consistent energy. So I found when I started my day with like a protein focused breakfast, which maybe will include some carbohydrates in there as well, and maybe a little bit of healthy fat, that my energy was steadier throughout the whole day. So specifically, breakfast would be some kind of protein bar that contains about 20 grams of protein, or this homemade trail smoothie that I like to make, which includes a greens powder, coconut milk powder as the fat, a protein powder, and then I add in like all sorts of anti-inflammatory and endurance boosting ingredients like ginger powder and cinnamon powder. And there's a functional mushroom powder called cordyceps that I add into there that's shown to boost endurance. So I make that at home, and that's the other breakfast that I usually eat on trail. And if people are interested, I have a recipe for that on my website. And so that smoothie is really important to me, because especially on a long hike, it really covers my nutritional bases, like especially with that greens powder in there that has tons, it's this mixture of like 15 to 20 different fruits and vegetables ground down into a powder. So I can make sure that I'm getting a lot of those micronutrients that are found in fruits and vegetables that I might not be getting otherwise. Like if I'm just eating tortilla chips or tuna or whatever, which I love those things too, but they're not quite as, packed with the antioxidants as like fruits and vegetables would be. So that's why I like that smoothie and the greens powder in there. And then that usually gives me energy until mid-morning. And at that point, if I haven't had the protein bar earlier, that's when I'll have some sort of protein bar at that point, or, it depends on the day, or I might have like a packet of nut butter, or maybe some trail mix, something like that. Again, for me personally, I don't like super sugary, super high carb things. If I'm going to have like I might have like a fruit-based bar, like a date-based bar, like RX bars, or there used to be a company called 4 Points that made like a prune-based bar, which was really good. And it gave me steady energy. Kind bars, I think, are great. They're pretty energy dense, and they're mostly like nuts and seeds. So that would be like a mid-morning snack. And then lunch is usually will be based around like a protein, like a tuna pouch or something like that, and maybe some mustard, some crushed up chips. I mean, I'm pretty basic. I'm still a hiker. It doesn't have to be hard. But yeah, it's just gonna, again, like the protein and a little bit of fat and the carbs is going to give me the steady energy. Or sometimes this like strange combination of foods I like to eat is almond butter with sweet potato chips, which a lot of people
that sounds so really good, actually.
It's so good, yeah.
And then the tuna and the crushed up. Thank you for backing me up on the tuna. I love tuna for lunch.
Yes,
my
so
hiking
easy.
partner is grossed out by it every time, but I love it. And then crushed up chips with that sounds really good. I think I'm going to start doing that.
Yeah, just crush them up, dump them in there, and then I just eat it all with a spoon.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. And then like a mid-afternoon snack might be like salted nuts, like some sort of trail mix like that that's going to have, I'm looking for something that's calorie dense. Again, it's easy, or it might be another bar, or maybe jerky, or maybe some combination of those things. And then dinner is, again, based around a protein, a healthy like whole food carbohydrate, and a fat. So it might be like chicken, instant rice, dehydrated veggies, and a packet of olive oil and some spices, or maybe like beans, like refried beans, or hummus powder and some coconut oil and some crushed up tortilla chips. Again, super easy, and really like flexible. I just want to make sure I'm kind of hitting those like nutritional bases with the protein, the carb, and the fat. And that's sort of like a template that I think through when I'm creating meals at home.
Right.
And then dinner is always dark chocolate, and that's it.
We live in a society as hikers where it's all high salt, backpackers pantry, mountain house, ramen, huge, a lot of salt. And for those who don't have an eye for creating something as simple as doing a tuna packet with some chips, what brands would you recommend in terms of a meal?
Yeah, like the things you can package
So you can add
purchase
water
commercially.
and it'll just reconstitute.
Yeah, is there a better, like Mountain House and Backpackers Pantry are the big, is there a better option, but that's still like just pour the water in?
Yes, that's a great question. And I will say I don't have a ton of like personal experience with this. I usually just make some simple meals at home, but I'll share a couple brands that I have seen that I have heard good things and heard, and like it looks promising to me from like a nutritional perspective. So one is Wild Zora. They have some really good foods, really good prepackaged meals like breakfast, dinners. They also have these like veggie and meat jerky bars, so it's kind of good because you're getting some of those veggies in with like your jerky, and it's all like grass fed, like good stuff. Another one I think is called Heather's Choice. I've heard really good things about that. Is it Good to Go? Yeah, I should just stop there because I don't know any other specific ones at this point. I'm kind of guessing.
Okay, no, that's a start.
It's helpful. Yeah,
those are a couple.
Okay, and then I had a question on here, but you kind of already answered it. It doesn't sound, which I like, it doesn't sound like tons of prep time at home goes into these. It doesn't sound really that much more complicated than what I do for my food bag.
Yes, not a lot of prep time at home. I mean, more than if you were on a thru hike and you were just like, I don't know, going to the gas station, like pushing a bunch of like Snickers bars into your bag. So maybe like a little more prep than that and a little more thought than that.
Oh,
but
I feel seen.
But yeah, it's not too complicated. Like, as I mentioned, one of my criteria is simplicity. I personally don't enjoy the process of like making big meals over the winter and then dehydrating them and doing the whole like dehydrating your backpacking food at home thing, which I know a lot of people love that. That's just not something that I personally enjoy. So my approach to creating my own meals at home is to purchase bulk freeze-dried or dehydrated ingredients and then to combine them at home. So what my process essentially looks like is if I'm going on a trip, I'm going to decide roughly how many calories I need per day for that particular trip. And then I'm going to brainstorm meals and snacks that I enjoy. And, you know, if you've been backpacking for a while, you have a handful of go-tos that work for you. And then I will put those into a spreadsheet, make sure that I'm hitting my calorie goal. So I'll say, like, for example, okay, I need like 5 of my smoothies, and then I need 10 bars so that I can eat 2 each day. And I need 5 ounces of almonds or whatever it is. I'll put it in my spreadsheet, do the math easily, make sure I'm hitting my calorie goal for each day or for like a 5-day section. And then, if I have meals that I'm going to assemble at home, I will shop either online at places like Amazon so that I can shop in bulk, or in person at somewhere like Costco or Trader Joe's is another one that I've stocked up at for through hikes. And then, I will just take that home. I will, assemble it into the portions that I want it in. And then as far as making my own meals, I sort of just do that assembly line style. So I will like set up the bag of beans and put a measuring cup in it, set up the bag of dehydrated veggies, put another measuring cup in that, like set up the bag of like taco seasoning, put a little teaspoon thing in that. And I will just like literally walk down the row and dump, measure into each little sandwich baggie, Ziploc baggie, and then it's done. So there's my meal. And then when I'm ready to make it on trail, I'm going to have an olive oil packet or 2 that I'm going to add to it. And I just assemble all my meals easily. It takes a couple hours. And if you have friends who love you, even shorter, you just buy them a pizza and, put some music on and have them come over, and you can just knock it out pretty quickly. So it's does not need to be complicated at all.
You can find olive oil packets. They're smaller.
Yes. The brand is called Marconi, and I think the website is minimus.biz, and they sell individual, I think they're like 0.6 ounce olive oil packets.
That's awesome.
They're awesome. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yes. Yeah. Never worry about like having to carry the bulk container or having to spill in the pack or anything like that, which is great.
Sweet.
Yep. Actually, and there's individual coconut oil packets that they sell at Trader Joe's, which are awesome as well.
The mind is going now.
Yes. Yes.
Can you talk about and tell us about Shurka, and your work and what you do there.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I started a couple of years ago, I started working as a guide for Andrew Skurka and also as an online instructor for his online Plan Like a Pro course. So, and at this point,
I'm sorry. When you said Shurka, I didn't realize it was Andrew Shurka. That's really cool.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I feel that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's good.
So for our listeners that don't know, can we rewind and can you talk a little bit about Andrew Skurka, briefly?
Yeah, yep. So Andrew is a long distance backpacker, and he has been kind of in the scene for quite a long time, and he's well known for like ultralight backpacking and some of these really big trips that he's done in the past. There's a Great Western Loop that he did that I think is like 7,400 miles. He did a sea to sea route from coast to coast. He's done a trip in the Arctic in Alaska.
I was going to say Alaska.
Yeah, a very ambitious trip there as well. He's written a book called The Ultimate Hiker's Gear Guide, and he has this blog that is full of really like meticulous, extensive, well-written, well-researched information. And that's where he, I think, really gained a lot of popularity because his blog was such an incredible go-to resource for backpackers. Like all these tutorials on how to read weather in the backcountry, how to navigate, and like really well-researched and well-written in-depth tutorials about all of that stuff, gear reviews, all the things. So he now runs a guiding program, and we run trips in 6 different locations. So we have Utah coming up in a couple of weeks, and then we do a trip in Colorado in the sand dunes. There's a trip in the Sierras, a trip in West Virginia, and then we're adding a trip, and one in Alaska, and then there's a new location in Washington this year. He does these guided trips, and he has a team of guides now at this point, and I'm one of those guides. And then he also
congratulations, that is fantastic. So just for our listeners, you have to send in an application for these. Like this is it is a process, and then you are selected, if I'm correct.
That's correct. Yeah, I think we had 650 applications for about 500 spots this year.
Yes.
Yeah. And I helped with the application review process, and it's like this complex web of like multiple spreadsheets, and like you said, the application process is very in-depth. So yeah, and I mean, it's not just like for there to be like hoops to jump through. It's because he really wants to make sure that he's placing people on the correct trips and in the right locations and with the groups that they're going to work best with. And that's something his trips are kind of well known for, is really matching groups up. And that's one of the things we always hear after the trips are over, is people like, oh my gosh, I made some really amazing friends and we're planning this other trip together. And that's a big part of the experience, as well as the people that you get to go out there with.
So how did you fall in with him and his company?
Yeah. So I just happened to see an Instagram post that he put up in December of 2020, which was interesting because I was kind of on an Instagram break at that point. And I just happened to open the app and I saw this, his post pop up, and it was like hiring 2021 guides. And I was like, oh, I've kind of always wanted to be a guide. So I just wrote a cover letter and put together an application for that and sent it off sort of in an unattached way, because I was like, he probably gets hundreds of applications, I'm sure. So who knows if I will ever hear back. I mean, yes, I believe that I have great skill set and I'm qualified and all of that, but I just knew that it was competitive. So I wasn't expecting to hear much. But yeah, I got a call back, did the interview with he and Joe, and then a week later got an email saying they wanted to hire me. So
that's awesome.
It's super exciting. Yeah. It's been a great program to be part of. And I just loved guiding so much more than I even imagined that I would. It's a really fulfilling experience to support people in having those really expansive outdoor experiences. And you guys as backpackers both know just all the levels of reward that come from being in the outdoors on, just like physically and mentally and spiritually and all of that. And so to get to be part of someone else's experience and helping them go out safely and increase their confidence in the outdoors is yeah, it's truly a very rewarding experience.
And what trips do you guide? Like, what's your, because I know each guide is specifically hired for an area of expertise. Either they are familiar with a certain section. I would imagine that you're bringing in nutrition and alternative. So yeah, this is all I want to talk about now. So what,
Yes.
what trips do you run?
Yep. So yes, you're correct that he does like to have the guides come on, especially at this point. So I'll say early on, he was looking for, and he started his trips in 2011. So early on, he was looking for people who knew how to backpack in a similar style as he was teaching. So sort of that like light and fast style, where we're more teaching focused in terms of like teaching people backpacking skill sets, and especially like lightweight backpacking, versus courses you might take somewhere else where it's not as teaching focused. It's more like, we'll carry a bunch of your stuff and we'll cook your meals for you and we'll set up your tents for you. Like, we don't do that. Like, we help our clients learn how to do those things. So early on, he was really looking for like people who had just that like long distance hiking, backpacking skill set. And now as the guide team has grown, he's really been focused on first, like having a more diverse group of guides. So including women, people of color, people just of like different backgrounds. So that's something he's been focusing on in recent years. And then also, as you mentioned, bringing on certain skill sets like botanists or geologists or people who have like a specific area knowledge. So I would say, like, in terms of like why was I hired, I would say for like knowledge of guiding in Colorado, which, you know, is really, it's where I live. So I've done a ton of exploration here. And in the Sierras, I guided last year because it's somewhere where I have quite a bit of experience. And yeah, I do, like, if there's ever like nutrition or food questions for when clients or students ask, they're like, okay, go ask Katie. I'm like, sure. So yeah, I definitely bring that skill set to the table. And I'm always expanding like my naturalist skill set in terms of wherever I'm guiding. So this year I'm guiding in West Virginia, Colorado, the Sierras, and Utah. So I'm always expanding like my skill set in each of those locations.
Where in West Virginia?
Dolly Stotts.
Awesome. And how long is that trip going to be?
I think we do 2 5-day trips in West Virginia. I think Seneca Rocks and Dolly Stotts are those. And those are in October. So it's like,
nice time
peak
of year
season when we're there. Yeah.
So I was going to ask, you go all year round?
It's not year round, but it's close.
Okay.
So it's our first trip is starting in late April in Utah, and then our last trip is, I think, ends on October 20th in West Virginia. So yeah.
And then that's obviously going to depend on, you know, the seasons for whatever region you're going to. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of factors, especially with like wildfires in the West at this point, a lot of factors that we're thinking about in terms of like what's the heaviest bug pressure, or like what are the temperatures and the precipitation going to be like, and like how likely are we to get smoked out, like to then an issue. Like if you were going to California in the Sierras in September, like that's a great time to be there, and historically that's when he's always planned trips there, is like late August, September, except in recent years he's run into issues almost every year with dealing with wildfires in the area and nearly having to cancel trips or having to cancel trips. And it's very stressful. Like, you have all these clients who have made their travel plans and who have paid you. And then, you know, we don't want to put them in, and wouldn't put anyone in unsafe conditions.
Of course.
Yeah. Didn't the Park Service just say we give up and just close everything out there? Was that last year or the year before?
It was last year. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. The Park Service just gave up and said, parks closed, go home. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Fantastic. So if you're willing, we would love to have you back on to talk about, once you go through some of these trips this year, especially the West Virginia one, I would love to have you back on to do, you know, an episode on that specifically. But
sure.
You recently just took a trip to Baja, Mexico. Can you give us some highlights and maybe travel advice for heading to another country?
Because not only is Katie went to Baja, but also our bike packer
Yes.
was
so
also
you
in Baja.
are our second.
Oh,
Yes, you
so
are
it's calling to you guys.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yep, you're our second guest. You're our second international guest.
Well, I would love to say I was doing backpacking there, but I was not doing a lot of backpacking there. I actually was there working with a client, helping her to do just sort of like a complete health reset. Sometimes it's easier to just shift your mindset and your patterns when you're away from home. And it's kind of, a new experience to some degree when we go out into the backcountry. Like you're just in a new environment and you can sort of like look at your own patterns. So that's what we were doing with her. We were working on her health habits and helping her set goals for the coming year. She's a backpacker as well. So we were working to get her ready for some of her upcoming trips. Some of the highlights were just being in a different environment and being in the warmth. It was like Colorado was like, I think where I live, we were having like single digit temperatures while I was in Mexico. So I was there enjoying at least weather that was in the 60s and getting some sun.
So nice.
Got to see some whales birthing calves in a lagoon on the Pacific Ocean, like right there. So we went, where we were staying was on the Sea of Cortez side, but we did a trip over to the Pacific Ocean side and got to go on this little boat tour where we got to see these whales and their calves, which was pretty neat, and to learn all about them. And then, just like being immersed in the culture. And of course, like the food was delicious. So that was a highlight. As far as advice, don't drink the water. That's a tip.
Yeah.
General travel advice, I think, though, is having a plan, but keeping it loose and flexible. And I think that applies to hiking as well. And it's sort of like a mindset that I try to keep in mind.
Yeah, and check Katie's Instagram for the whale pictures. That's why I threw that question in.
Yes.
I have to say,
fantastic.
Katie, your Instagram is fantastic. I know you said that it's all over the place, but I have to say there's a lot of inspirational stuff on Katie's page, so go check that out.
I appreciate that.
And we will end with a trail tale, but before we forget, because I almost forgot with our previous guest, I think, or the guest before, but can you do all of your plugs, your website, your social media, all of that good stuff?
Oh, sure. Yeah, thanks for asking. So katiegerber.com is my website, and that's where you can find my one-to-one health coaching that I offer, as well as the online courses that I have, which include like a nutrition for backpackers course. I have a navigation online course, and a course called Adventure Ready that helps people get their health ready for backpacking season. I also have a free introductory nutrition course for hikers if you're interested in that. And then on social, I'm most active on Instagram, and it's just at Katie Gerber.
Excellent. And then, as I mentioned, we always close out any interview with having our guests share some sort of trail tale.
Sure. So one of my favorite trail tales is from the PCT. So I had planned to hike through the Sierra section, which is 222, 225-ish miles. And I wanted to so it's a section through the High Sierra where you go that distance without crossing another highway. So if you want to get off into a town, like obviously there are ways that you can get off, but you kind of have to do like passes off to the side and like drop down into some towns. But I had, in my planning phase and having never hiked that far in one stretch without a resupply, thought that it was a great idea to do that. So it was going to be like an 11 to 12 day section without resupplying. And so my pack going into that section was extremely heavy. I think I had, let's see if it was 2 pounds of food per day. I think I had about 25 pounds of food on top of my base pack weight, because it was probably about like 2 pounds of food per day. So my pack was extremely heavy, but I was determined to do this because I thought it was a great idea. And I had linked up with a guy, and we were hiking this section together, and he had kind of like hopped on board my idea of like, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea, even though it was not a great idea at all. But he decided to hike this section with me that was going to be like 11 to 12 days without resupply. And we were moving much slower than expected because it's the High Sierra and you're adjusting to the altitude, not to mention our like 40 to 50 pound packs that we were carrying. going up and over these passes, multiple passes a day sometimes. And so we're moving slower and eating more than expected. So by the time we were getting kind of towards the end of that section, we were very low on food. And it's when we started, we had joined up with the part where it was like it co-joins with the JMT. And so we had started seeing these JMTs, like hikers they were very well stocked with all their food and everything that they needed. And we had the fortunate event of one of them that we were just chatting with. They had just stayed at Muir Trail Ranch. It was like 2 hikers, and they were supposed to have a third with them, but the third had gotten sick and had to get off the trail. And they had cached food at Muir Trail Ranch. Like the directions that they gave us were so funny. So basically, like they had cached food there, but one of the hikers didn't pick up his cache, and they were like, "We're just going to have to go back and pick it up later. It's full of food." And my hiking partner and I, at that point, were like starving, not literally starving. We were so hungry because we had been, going slow and hiking hard, and we were rationing our food. And so when they told us, we were like, oh my gosh, this is like a gift from heaven. And so
Trail provides.
Yes, they like drew out a map for us, and they're like, okay, you're going to come around this bend in the trail at like whatever mile near the river. And then you're going to like look over and you're going to see a group of 3 trees. And under that tree, we've piled
National treasure.
some rock up over these buckets. And so it was ridiculous. So we went like chasing after this food, which we had not planned to like go to Muir Trail Ranch at all. We were going to go all the way through, but when we heard this food was there, we were like, yes, we have to do this. And we searched and searched, couldn't find the bucket. My friend dropped his pack, ran back to the hikers who had gone on the other way to get more specific directions of exactly where this food was cached, and then ran back to me. And he's like, okay, I've got the exact coordinates now. And so we were able to find this food cache, and we just like feasted that night, like on all of the food that like the peanut butter M&Ms and the pretzels and like all the food. So that was like one of the most magical things that ever happened to me on trail. It was just this gift of like this bucket of food.
And how many days from when you found the food to when you were finishing the Sierra?
It wasn't too much longer. I'm trying to remember, but I think it was only like another maybe 3 or 4 days that we had.
Still, it was enough.
But yeah, it was enough that the food was like, it was awesome. Yeah, it made a big difference. Yeah. And we're just so grateful. And that was one of those moments again where, like you said, like the trail provides and like the universe feels magical and aligned.
Well, we're glad you're here to tell the tale, that's for sure.
Yes.
I love moments like that, where you're in need of food like you, and you find something, or we've had moments where shelter didn't work out, but then we found something better, like a cabin. So those are amazing moments. So yes. Excellent. I think that's all I have. Do you have anything else, Tumbles?
I think we've covered so much in the past hour. Katie, thank you so much for joining us once again. You were a plethora of information.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you guys for asking me to be on. It was a lot of fun talking with you.
Great.
Yeah, that flew by. This was absolutely fantastic, and we will definitely have to have you back on.
Sounds great.
Alrighty, y'all. You know where to find us. It was announced in the beginning. Last but not least, ciao.